Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the 16th Annual Bob Rose Lecture presented by the RACV Club in conjunction with the Robert Rose Foundation and supported by the Melbourne Press Club. My name is Sarah Allen. It's a pleasure to host you on what is a quiet old day in Australia. Not much going on today, is there? Now, while I can't tell you who will be leading this country by the end of today, what I can tell you is we have a fantastic afternoon ahead of us as we hear from a pioneer of the Australian arts and media industry, Kim Williams AM, who will deliver the Bob Rose Lecture, followed by respected businessman and former AFL CEO, Andrew Demetrio, who will deliver the response and vote of thanks. Two men who have achieved great success in their respective industries and no doubt have you captivated this afternoon. So please join me in welcoming Kim and Andrew today. Now, there is probably only one other event that would have Melbourne talking as much as a leadership spill, and that, of course, is a Collingwood and Richmond grand final. Can you imagine Melbourne? Now, that is a reality. Next Sunday is exactly what's happening in the inaugural season of the AFL wheelchair competition. Richmond will be playing Collingwood in the grand final. Let's hope it's a sign of things to come in the AFL. And I'll be chatting to two of the stars from Collingwood and Richmond shortly, and we're looking forward to that. And of course, the main reason we're all here today is to support the amazing work of the Robert Rose Foundation, which supports those living with trauma, spinal cord injuries and their families. As many of you will know, Robert Rose had a bright future ahead of him. A brilliant sportsman who played for both Collingwood and Footscray when he became a quadriplegic at the age of 22 following a car accident. The Rose family, led by Robert's father, Bob, in which today's lecture is named after, led the way in creating the foundation, and we will hear from Robert's brother, Peter, shortly to give an update on the work that they're doing at the moment. Now, there are a lot of special people and organisations who have given up their time to support this great cause, so please do hold your applause until the end, but join me in welcoming some special people in the room today. To the representatives of the Rose family, great to see such a strong presence in the room. Peter Rose and his partner, Christopher Menz, Robert's uncle, 1958 premiership player, former Collingwood captain and club president, and Robert Rose Foundation director, Kevin Rose, and his partner, Pamela Watkins. Kevin's daughter and foundation director, Natalie Rose Harwood, and her husband, Craig Harwood. And we have a couple of apologies today. Robert's daughter, Sally Caruana, and Robert's mother, Elsie Rose, are apologies. Elsie, unfortunately, she's been to most lectures, but she's not well enough to join us today, and we send her our best wishes. To fellow directors of the Robert Rose Foundation, including the chair, Derek Young. Welcome to you, Derek. There's a strong contingent from Collingwood today, the Collingwood President Eddie Maguire and fellow members of the Collingwood Board, and also members of the Collingwood CBD Group and their guests, welcome. To the Director of RACV, Graham Willis, thanks for being with us today. Members of the Melbourne Press Club Board and guests, including Club Chief Executive Mark Baker and President Adele Ferguson. To representatives from the AFL, including Andrew Dillon, Elizabeth Lucan, Stephen Mead and Jude Donnelly and your guests, thanks for being with us. And also to those from AFL Victoria. We also have many guests from other AFL clubs, including the Western Bulldogs, GWS and Hawthorn Football Club. So we hope you enjoy the afternoon. To the players of the Wheelchair AFL competition, the inaugural season, thanks for being with us today and well done on a fantastic first season. To representatives from Disability Sport and Recreation Victoria, which has partnered with AFL Victoria and the Robert Rose Foundation to stage the inaugural season of the AFL wheelchair competition. We also have many friends from the media with us today, from The Age, Editor-in-Chief Alex Lavelle, Sports Editor Greg Baum, Chief Football Writer Jake Niles, Senior Football Writer Michael Gleeson and Football's First Lady Caroline Wilson, as well as from 3AW Tim Lane, who is a previous lecturer. Welcome to Peter Turner from Independence Australia and his guests, to representatives from Minter Ellison Lawyers and their guests, Carol Fox, the President of Women in Sport Australia, former Matilda and Deputy CEO of Professional Footballers Association, Catherine Gill, former Richmond Premiership ruckman Michael Green joins us again, and of course welcome to RACV members and guests. That is a huge list, but you all very special to the Robert Rose Foundation, so please join me in welcoming our special guests today. Now, the Robert Rose Foundation is the principal sponsor of the inaugural AFL wheelchair competition, and we have players here from all clubs today: Collingwood, Richmond, Hawthorn, Essendon and St Kilda, a fantastic turnout. But as I mentioned earlier, it is all about Collingwood and Richmond as they prepare to take each other on in the grand final next Sunday. So as we welcome to the side of the stage the Collingwood captain and coach Brendan Stroud and Richmond star Yasmina McGlone, please turn your attention to the screens and check out some of the work from the league's best players. Fantastic stuff there. Now, Brendan, there was a big shot of you smiling at the end, as if you wouldn't be. Undefeated, first season as Collingwood coach and captain. You must be pretty confident going into the grand final next Sunday.
Yeah, I'd like to think I'm pretty confident. Got a great team. Richmond's a fantastic team as well. So I'm always smiling being Collingwood captain and coach. So it's been a dream come true for me.
Now, the grand final preview was last weekend. Richmond lost to Collingwood. But Yasmina, you told me a little earlier that you're pretty confident going into the grand final next week.
Yeah, definitely. I just think, we didn't want to put all our cards on the table. So we just gave them a sneak peek. And yeah, I think we've definitely got more to give on Sunday.
You've been holding back all your secret weapons. Now, how does a Scottish girl end up playing Aussie rules football?
Yeah, I guess at first I was friends with Jude, who I play with, and I came down to watch him in the touring league, and I watched them play, and they were just amazing. And then through that, I met Brendan, and me and Brendan, we just caught up one time, and he actually asked me to come along to the draft. But I think in his head, he was expecting me to be recruited to his team. But yeah, I've ended up playing for Richmond instead.
Not only did he not recruit you to Collingwood, but you're playing for the arch enemy. Brendan, that didn't really turn out how you'd planned when you took Yasmina out for a beer a year ago.
Yeah, I should have gave her a couple of more beers, but I know I was legless, but anyway. She's been fantastic, and the way she's just put herself all in, and how beautiful she is. She's really a tiger inside. Though the Magpies would peck her at her. Last week's game was a great little, I suppose, synopsis into what's going to come into the grand final. I don't think any of our teams on that day put our best fives on until virtually the last quarter. So it was still good for Collingwood to come away from 11-point winners, and we hope to come by a little bit more in the grand final. But it'll be a great game. Yaz is just, she may look beautiful, and she is. She's a girl who will just rip the ball out of your hands. And if you don't have the ball, she'll rip anything off your hands. So she's fantastic, and she was best on ground as far as I was concerned last Sunday for both teams. She just puts everything in and scares the hell out of the guys, I think. So she's great. So.
Brendan, you've coached a lot of young players coming through in wheelchair football. Tell us a little bit about what it means to have this competition up and running in the inaugural season and where it can go from here.
I'll go back about 3.5 years ago when we first started Wheelchair Aussie Rules, and we had 8 players. We were struggling to get even 8 to train, and having 4-on-4 when you want to play 5-on-5 is really hard. So they were having the games, the nationals here in Victoria, and I think it was South Australia put up, hey, do you want to put a team in? Of course, home of football, why wouldn't we want to put a team in? So we had about 7 weeks to train. So I got a lot of basketballers put together, and a few other players who are new to the sport. Muzz, who is captain and coach of the St Kilda team, and a couple of other players, and we ended up getting silver that year, so we were great from us. And Richard Damon from the Disability Sport and Recreation, he's a player who's been playing for the last 3.5 years as well, and Tim Neild, who's also now in AFL Victoria, or AFL now, he's played a couple of times as well last year, coached. So from there, it's just grown and grown and grown and grown. So when Collingwood came on board late last year and the other 4 teams followed, it's just gone huge. We probably weren't expecting it to come on as hard and fast as it did, but it's come on fantastically. I think it's sat really well with everybody to where it can grow to. So hope to have a few more teams on next year. Hope to have a social competition coming up in the next probably month or so, so people don't get sitting home playing Xbox and getting weary, so get out and do something. So it's growing really fast for us. So.
And you both can touch on this, but it's not just about the football, is it? It's also a positive outlet for some individuals who would have gone through some challenging times.
I can say from my own personal view, sport has been my saviour in my life. There's times where I've battled depression through a lot of parts of my life. And before my accident, I've always been an athlete: boxing, kickboxing, football, cricket, taekwondo. I had my car accident at 22 as well. I was a quadriplegic when I had my accident. It was incomplete break of my neck. I was very lucky to get the use of my arms back. And finding sport through Disability Sport and Recreation was my saviour. So sport is a big mental saviour for a lot of people, getting out and doing something. Everyone has a flame, everyone has a passion. So keeping that passion and flame alive is imperative for our own mental health. And this is what sport's done for us, and this is what Wheelchair Aussie Rules has done for a lot of people. I've met a few people over the years that have coached and who are still playing now, obviously, who've just grown from that, and it's turned into a great community and family that we all love. We all look out for each other. We're all having coffees afterwards and things like that. So it's come along really, really well for everybody.
Yasmina, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, the sport itself has just enhanced my life. I'm so thankful to be part of it, because I just feel like I'm part of this amazing community, and we've all got each other's backs. So it's so good. Like, even though we play against each other, we also want to encourage each other to develop and grow. So it's just been an amazing experience, and it's just great to find something that I feel so passionate about. So yeah, I'm just really enjoying it. It's been amazing.
Now, you're both saying a lot of nice things about each other and the other players in the league, but surely the same rivalries exist in the wheelchair competition as they do in the AFL competition. Surely you hate Essendon and Richmond. You must hate Essendon and Collingwood. Does they still exist, the rivalries on the court?
Yeah, definitely. Probably not as much as we hate Carlton, but last time I was at Carlton, I came out of the room and my actual wheelchair was on bricks and I was still sitting on it. They were that quick. Sorry, mate. The rivalry is still there, but you have that tenacity and going hard at the ball when you're playing against each other. But when you come off the court, you're great mates and stuff like that. So reading the ball in a wheelchair is quite different too. I've played wheelchair basketball for Australia, and trying to read a football in a wheelchair is quite difficult. Bad enough for Steve Milne. So, sorry, personal dig there. Sorry. I love that grand final. Anyway, the second one anyway. So it's really hard to read in a wheelchair as well, because you get that uneven bounce that's going to go underneath your wheelchair. But the rivalry's still there, but we come off the court, we're all friends and stuff, and just there for each other, so it's been fantastic. And this guy who's just come in late, he's my brother. He's a fantastic. He's the Hawthorn captain and coach. So if you want to make your way over to the table, that'd be great. Thanks, Pete. Pete's got a beautiful story to tell about how he got into his life and into Wheelchair Aussie Rules. I got him in a few years ago, and he's just come along in Steeds, and he's a fantastic, lovable bloke. So he's definitely a brother of mine. So I love him heaps. So yeah, now get over there. Go on. Yeah, just duck. Oh, you can't. Sorry. Yeah. Just scoot. Yeah. Just dab as you're going past or something. So yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Now, Brendan, you've played wheelchair basketball and tennis for Australia. Where does an AFL grand final fit in terms of great achievements?
Taking the premiership away in next weekend would be fantastic for me. I suppose having played football before my accident, I didn't do much basketball or tennis before my accident, but a lot of football. So this coming back into this is a new thing for me, and taking away a premiership to whatever gold medals and stuff I got in basketball and stuff. This will be on the top shelf, so it'd be great to see a replica in Eddie's room somewhere, not in his bedroom. So that's where Nathan is, I think. So, sorry, Ed, I'll probably get sacked now. So.
Not if you win the premiership, you won't.
No, yeah, I'll get home the cup. I've also got a footy record for you, Eddie. But yeah, it's right on the top there. I don't think I could go past that. Winning a football premiership to me would be fantastic. So yeah, I'm sure it would be for every other guys and girls come on to this sport. So having a Scottish lass come in is like having Mason Cox come in for us. So they're both adapted really well. This one's just a little bit shorter and a damn good looking. Mason's got his good looks, I guess, but too tall to do anything with, so yeah.
Before we let you go, your tips, obviously we know who you're going to say will win next Sunday, but what's the margin? How much will Collingwood win by? How much will Richmond win by?
I reckon it's going to be close. I reckon I'd like to keep it around double figures, so everyone's on the just the edge of the seats. 11, 12 points would be good for Collingwood to win, of course. So thanks, Mark. Just to keep everyone on the edge of the seats would be fantastic.
Yasmina?
I'm going to go with, I think we're going to win by 13 points. Yeah.
Said with confidence as well. I like it. And now let's talk the AFL season as well. Who's your tip to make it through finals and play in the granny in the AFL season? Richmond, Collingwood?
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely back in Richmond as well. And so, yeah, in all aspects, so hoping they'd win their second grand final.
Brendan, how about you?
I'd love it to be Collingwood and Richmond again in the men's, and that'd be fantastic to go away with a double premiership this year. So that'd be fantastic for Collingwood, obviously. So yeah, it'd be great. So I think it'd be Collingwood, Richmond in both, so to take it away. So we've had a few injuries in Collingwood in the men's, so we get those players back, and I think we'll be fine. So we've given it to Richmond up to 3/4, and we died out a bit. So. In the last quarter due to injuries and things like that. But Richmond's a fantastic side. No, can't take that away from them. They've finished on top for a reason. So it's always good to try and get those blighters down. So it's great.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure everyone agrees it's been fantastic hearing from both of you this afternoon. You're both confident going into next Sunday. We wish you both the best for the match and look forward to hearing how you go. Please put your hands together for Brendan and Yasmina. Now, supporting the wheelchair competition is just one of the great things that the Robert Rose Foundation is doing in their work. Let's hear from Peter Rose for an update on the other things that they're doing with the Robert Rose Foundation.
Thank you, Sarah. Brendan's a hard act to follow, I must say. It was wonderful to hear about the achievements of the Victorian Wheelchair Football League, which the Robert Rose Foundation is very happy to support. I can only imagine the pleasure that the code would have given to my late brother Robert had he regained power in his arms. But it's a fantastic code, and it just shows us how far we have come as a society in those 40 years since my brother became a quadriplegic. It's a pleasure to be speaking very briefly about the foundation and my friend Kim Williams before he gives the lecture. Sarah's mentioned that my mother Elsie is not attending. I think it's the first lecture she has missed since it was created in 2003, weeks after my father died. Mum's 92 now and not as steady on her pins as she once was. but she would have loved to be here, and she sends greetings, and I know that she told me that she will be with us in spirit, and those of you who know my mother will appreciate what a powerful and active and empathetic force that entails. In fact, she was literally with me a moment ago when she sent me a text. I called her in my book, Rose Boys, Reuters Rose for a reason. There's someone who should have been on the journalist table. And she just sent me a text saying, "What an unholy mess." Now, I can assure you she's not referring to your wardrobe or to the food, but events further north. I was thrilled when I learned that Kim Williams had agreed to deliver this year's lecture. He's someone whom many of us in the arts hold in the highest esteem. A quick perusal of Kim's CV induces an acute sense of ennui at the modesty of one's own attainments. Kim really has done everything in business and the media, yet he goes on contributing in his current position as chair of the Copyright Agency, where he's making a potent contribution to the well-being of individual artists and arts organisations, including the one that I lead, Australian Book Review, while also alerting citizens and government to new menaces to intellectual freedom and the primacy of copyright. Kim Williams, endearingly, for me in particular, is also passionate about music and all the arts. He was, from a young age, a musician himself, and I believe he was composing works from his teens. Like John F. Kennedy, not Dad's great Hawthorne adversary, I might add, like President Kennedy, Kim Williams knows that the arts are central to any civilised society. It was Kennedy, perhaps prompted by his rather cultivated wife, who remarked, "The life of the arts is far from a distraction in the life of a nation. It is close to the centre of a nation's purpose and is a test of the quality of a nation's civilisation." I wonder if our new Prime Minister will be uttering remarks of that nature later on today. Private philanthropy, as we all know, has transformed this country in recent decades. Australia has emphatically caught up with altruistic societies like the United States. And Kim Williams's role in this transformation has been pivotal. The list of arts organisations he supports is endless. He sets a wonderful example for all of us. But Kim's generosity is not limited to the arts. We all know that some of the most pressing needs in this community lie elsewhere. That is why Kim and his wife, Catherine Dovey, have endowed the Williams Dovey Scholarship at the Centre for Social Impact. And I imagine it is why, busy man though he is, that this particular lecture appealed to him because of the charity with which it is associated. The challenges and difficulties facing those with spinal cord injuries cannot be exaggerated. Only those who have direct experience of SCIs know what it does to individuals and family units. When I spoke at my father's funeral in 2003, I remarked, speaking metaphorically, that the four of us went through a terrible fire in 1974 when my brother became a quadriplegic in an accident. There was nothing exceptional about the Roses story. It happens across the country behind closed doors. Privately, stoically, desperately, families battle to help their injured members and to stay together and possibly to stay sane. It is one of the neediest communities and one of the most marginalised. And that is why my parents agreed to create a charity named after my brother soon after his death in 1999. The foundation's sole purpose is to help those with spinal cord injuries. Here, private donations are vital if we are to make a difference. And that is why the Bob Rose Annual Lecture is a significant occasion in our calendar. Oratory and conviviality are important, but for us, there is another priority today. The Foundation does not receive any proceeds from these lunches. They are RACV events, not Foundation ones. The Foundation relies totally on separate donations, and here I encourage all of you, especially the AFL world, to which my father was a selfless contributor, to join me in completing the donation form in front of you, and thus helping us to go on supporting and celebrating this sterling, embattled community. And just a note, if you are so kind as to support the donation, there's been a change of a postal address, so don't send it, please. There are people around or at the door who will take your kind donations if you wish to make one. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much for that, Peter. We'll take a break now and you can enjoy your mains. And when we come back, we'll hear from Kim Williams, who is delivering today's lecture. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now ready to hear from the main person here today who will be delivering the 16th Bob Rose Lecture. Now, Kim told me to race through his CV, but it's too long and it's far too amazing to race through. So here we go. Kim Williams is a key figure in the Australian arts, entertainment and media landscape. He has had a long involvement in these industries, both in Australia and overseas, holding executive leadership positions since the late 1970s, including Chief Executive at each of News Corp Australia, Foxtel, Fox Studios Australia, the Australian Film Commission, Southern Star Entertainment and Music Viva Australia, and also as a senior executive at the ABC. At Foxtel, he pioneered many of the major digital broadcast innovations in Australia and received the 2012 Lifetime Achievement Award from the Australian Subscription Television Association, ASTRA, for his diverse contributions. Kim was appointed a member of the Order of Australia in June 2006, and in 2009 he was awarded a Doctorate of Letters by Macquarie University. These days, Kim is applying his extensive professional experience, undertaking varied writing, advisory and teaching assignments, and as a director in diverse governance roles. He is the current chair of Mojo Power, Cranlana and the Copyright Agency, and co-chair of the State Library of New South Wales Foundation. His first book, Rules of Engagement, was published by Melbourne University Press in 2014. A former professional clarinetist and composer, Kim wrote about the way music has influenced his thinking. Former CEO of the Copyright Agency, Kim has been described as a vocal advocate for creators' rights, fiercely intelligent, ethical and a fingers-to-the-bone workaholic, which we can see from your CV, Kim. Kim's experience across his distinguished career has been an asset to the AFL Commission, which he joined in 2014. In his role as a commissioner, Kim was a key figure in negotiating landmark media rights for the AFL. Today, he will be discussing the academic and cultural aspects of sport and Australian rules football in particular. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Kim Williams to deliver the 16th Bob Rose Lecture.
Thank you, Sarah. I've got to provide much briefer notes in future. As we gather today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of these ancestral lands of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present and to elders of other Indigenous communities in Australia. I also take this moment to acknowledge the diverse peoples and cultures who have been welcomed to this nation. Finally, I recognise our shared freedoms and responsibilities inherited from Magna Carta and on through the common law. All three elements are central to Australia's character and its future. As an Australian, I value the opportunity to acknowledge country as a simple act of reconciliation. I feel increasingly compelled to recognise the many peoples, ethnicities and faiths which comprise our nation, given the serious assault on difference which too often permeates our nation today. The common rights we all enjoy at law also need to be recalled and defended relentlessly, as we today contemplate that the march of humankind is often messy and not always one of progression. More than ever in my lifetime, history matters. Symbols matter. And Bob Rose is a mighty symbol in our game and its history. And the values he fought for in his life are those very values we need to celebrate and, yes, defend. They are values of enduring worth and which remain the bedrock of the AFL and everything it stands for. I salute the members of the Rose family here today. It's an honour to have you here and makes me more than a little nervous. Not only because of your representing the heartland of Collingwood and its precious, proud history, but also because Peter Rose will be a hard marker of my prose. Peter is a writer, poet and editor who I admire immensely, and his presence makes me feel cautious, even rather awkward, to say the least. As you'll appreciate, I am, from Sydney. A comparison drawn in 2005 by Gary Linnell, a previous speaker, to being from a foreign country. Or as he also said in AFL terms, an undiscovered country, on which he opined in his infectious, humorous way as to whether AFL would ever truly catch on. His judgment was somewhat thoughtful as he gave freely of his advice and celebrated aspects of rugby league and spoke as to the increasing commonality of the pack mentality filled with unsightly scrimmaging and dull passages where nothing much happens apart from herds of players improving their personal stats. Sound familiar, Mike? Only after I had accepted this invitation was I confronted with the cavalcade of remarkable speakers, including Gary, Jeffrey Blaney, Andrew Demetrio, John Harms, David Williamson, Tim Lane, James Griffin, Susan Alberti, Tim Watson, and of course, inevitably and very appropriately, Eddie Maguire. So I want you all to remember as I venture forth that I am from that foreign country, Sydney, that I grew up initially with rugby league and have been a convert, albeit a passionate one, to AFL over the last 17 years. I know I can count on you all to absorb normal AFL laws of the game and be kind to foreigners. In my own defence, I might say I've had many fine idiosyncratic tutors about the AFL over the years, most especially from Andrew Demetrio, Ron Evans, Bill Kelty, Mike Fitzpatrick, and of course Gillan McLaughlin, all of whom have given me, in a very free sense, a sense of wonder about aspects of the game. I've also learnt from driving negotiations in some memorably tough exchanges over the 10 years I was at Foxtel in building its coverage and devotion to Australia's game, where it pioneered many digital innovations in its coverage since broadcast commenced initially in 2002. I deliver this Bob Rose lecture today in unusually interesting times, as the allegedly Chinese saying goes, an apocryphal one where no actual Chinese source has ever been cited. We see strong threats to the values of connection, belonging and community, all the things in our game that are genuinely loved. Fear of the other, fear of the outsider and fear of the future appears to dominate discussion of nationhood and citizenship. At its most legitimate, it is genuinely felt fear of change when change is everywhere. I will talk to digital disruption and its challenges later. At its worst, it is a fear that is stoking division and disconnection, and in this context, the values of Bob Rose and the game he loved have a critical role to play. Bob and his legacy speaks to the concept of the AFL citizen, selfless, humble, broad-minded, committed to club and family, always working for something bigger than oneself. And let's remember how big AFL citizenship is. This month, the AFL passed the 1 million member mark, and that is just part of the story. Our AFL nation is huge. The participants, the volunteers, the kids, the viewers, the armchair fans and critics is a mighty army of engaged citizens, and the aspiration, hope and exhilaration which unites them provides a rare binding agent. I'd say that the concept of sporting citizenship lies at the heart of most Australians, and this comprises both the burden and liberation in being an AFL citizen. It is central to our unique national game, and at its best informs our nation's indelible spirit, providing a sense of that elusive concept of the true north, reflecting things beyond the field of play for all of us, all of us who are touched by footy in its broadest sense. It is seen in many exemplary individuals, like Bob Rose, in the Australian Football Hall of Fame and in the life memberships conferred by the AFL. And it is seen in more than just individuals. It's seen on our grounds and in the growing role for our game and our players to be Australia's better angels. What better example of the kind of citizenship Australians can celebrate than the riveting contest between the Kangaroos and the Swans in round 17, where Lear and Majak Daw delivered brilliant performances and a vision of what is possible in a fair-minded world. Compare that vision to the cheap, nasty views that got national coverage that same week from some in our body politic, promoting boorish slogans wanting to ban all African migration in knee-jerk, vapid responses engineered only to divide. In a very fine speech here some 7 years ago, Andrew Demetrio spoke passionately, and I might say very movingly, about what the AFL had done for him and his brothers, the way in which it had given him a sense of belonging, a sense of community, and an example of the democratisation and participation that sport delivers to immigrants. Andrew spoke quite personally as to the sense of inclusion, the passion the game engenders, and of the broad spectrum of people that meet equally week after week to watch a game as they support their teams. He paid, in characteristically generous terms, a tribute to Alan Aylett, reminding us of the fight for change to get games scheduled on Fridays and Sundays. He spoke about the great Ron Evans and his exemplary AFL citizenship in always saying, "You don't own the game, you're only ever a custodian until you pass it on in better shape." And Andrew spoke about the overriding need for fairness, responsiveness to a broad range of stakeholders and managed dependencies. Above all, he spoke to the necessity that in major AFL decisions there must be adherence to the central principle of growing the game together so that all may benefit. I know if he was giving this speech, and Andrew will speak soon enough in his return talking engagement since he left the AFL, that he would pay tribute to Gillian McLachlan, as I do, for his outstanding leadership in embracing those very principles and in a manner which reflects the very best transparency and respect for his responsibility to the game and all engaged with it. He is a great citizen of the AFL. And let's celebrate all the remarkable movements in social policy where the AFL has been a consistent contributor and in many instances a leader, stepping out from simply managing and regulating a national contest from grassroots development up through to the state and national leagues, promoting and celebrating competition between remarkable athletes in diverse teams to vast audiences across our land. The AFL long ago recognised the need to build the game in a way which reflected contemporary ethical disciplines for the good of the game, its players, supporters, and the nation at large. Accordingly, it launched the national competition over 25 years ago. It regularly adjusted the laws of the game to keep them fair, open, even-handed, driven by a desire to honour fans and improve the spectacle. We focused on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, who now comprise 11% of professional players. There is an Indigenous Advisory Council which is listened to attentively, and then there is the already announced future appointment of an AFL Indigenous Commissioner. We've launched the AFLW and will over time see that competition grow and thrive as we give strength and depth of meaning to the development of a women's contest of which all Australians can be proud. It's driven growth in the regional leagues in some parts of Australia by over 200%. It will take time, but the AFL has a rock-solid commitment. We've seen the establishment of a strong racial and religious vilification policy, which Tanya Hosch said when the current review was launched in the Indigenous round this year was an Australian first, and perhaps a first in world sport. It sent a very strong message that our game wanted to stand up against racism and that our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander players had protection and rights on the ground. And then we have policies with real teeth on competitive balance aimed to ensure equalisation between clubs with hard and soft money caps, an illicit drugs policy on which I will say no more today, privacy and integrity policies, and many others, all of which are geared to ensuring a tough, fair contest which respects our athletes, the overriding obligation to the fans, and which takes the game ever forward. All these things lie at the heart of AFL citizenship. They reflect the things which make the game great, which see us reflect positive aspirations for the hope and future of the game, its players, and their devoted fans. We find ourselves at the centre of the struggle for decent citizenship for good reason. People often say the world is changing. I think this wholly misses the point. The world is not changing, it has changed forever. In speaking today, we see a fascinating crossroad in terms of the AFL settings and prospects and the confronting ubiquitous digital genie. As you all know, the velocity of contemporary change produces thoroughly altered behaviours and expectations across our community. Much of this follows from the pervasive impact of digital technologies. These forceful changes demand adaptive ingenuity and the need for a resilient culture to sustain understanding and relevance. We've witnessed the largest power transfer in human history. I refer to the unprecedented transfer of power on the one hand from producers and authorities to consumers, or as I prefer to say, citizens. On the other, we've seen the rise of myriad, for want of a better term, dark forces, only accountable to hidden controllers which operate as an almost autonomous autarky in a way which is empowered uniquely by digital communication systems. The significance of these shifts is difficult to exaggerate, impossible to stop. Those who ignore the essential elements of change, where non-traditional authorities and massively distributed influences are now increasingly in charge, are destined to fail. Those who enter this new environment openly, with a determination to understand, adjust and adapt, have the best opportunity to prosper. Although success is far from guaranteed, a new set of paradigms are in evolution, and crystal balls are at best rather frosty. The only defence is a resilient culture which listens and learns, one which I believe reposes in the AFL, with its capacity to renew and adapt in response to many of these movements. For example, consumers now expect mobile devices to become the central controllers for other devices and services in their lives. The handy computer in your pocket rules the day with ever better functionality. We all must recognise that digital technology has changed forever the nature of information access, exchange, and the direction of society through politics, commerce, sport, creativity, education, and communication in life as we know it. Continuing fragmentation is guaranteed. The ferocity of attack and the velocity of change will not abate. Merit, ingenuity, speed, flexibility, and performance increasingly rule the day across the planet. We are a small country at the bottom of the world, notwithstanding the internet, with many parochial pillars which, whilst delightful to some, are truly venomous to bold national ambition and achievement. A nation of 25 million which speaks English is either profoundly advantaged or potentially disabled as a result almost entirely of the strength of its various enterprise cultures matched with public policy settings and the focus, ambition, fairness and outcomes they reflect. I suggest in an era of digital disruption, it is essential that we respect our duty of intergenerational care and acknowledge the need for regular policy and institutional review to ensure a healthy, dynamic cultural landscape, one which is ethical, innovative, connected and ambitious. This applies as much to the AFL as anyone else, seen, for example, in many of the issues the AFL is addressing presently, and where the health, welfare and strength of the game and its culture is being supported with caring review in several areas. looking at the character of the game itself, and then to supporting policies in a wide range of other domains. We live in an era of digital conundrums. It's properly said that volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity are the bywords for the current era. One of the many cultural challenges in this age of digital disruption seems to me to repose in how we marshal the resources of the diverse institutions of the nation, from parliaments to the organs of government and education, through to the pillars of the courts and on through bodies like the AFL, to regularly manage themselves in our contemporary service. They need to ensure they provide evidence of true connection with what is happening. From that, they need to move forward with a sense of purpose, confidence, simplicity and clarity in sharing knowledge, wisdom, and in providing explanations of policy and judgments. If we're frank, the absence of present relevance from many decision makers is pronounced, seen, for example, in a preference for demeaning sloganeering over policy substance. At the heart of the policy challenge is an essential element missing in so much of the digital domain, a sense of refashioned contemporary citizenship, digital citizenship. It is a complex topic with many strands. The notion of digital citizenship is an extension from what I termed AFL, or for broader context, sports citizenship. In the landscape we see today, quite remarkable resources are deployed as never before, invariably from that friendly, omnipresent computer in your pocket, with immediate access to so much, some would argue virtually all, of the world's accumulated knowledge. But, and it is a very big B-U-T, so often the reception of that information is absent the core discipline of active listening and the critical allied skills of analysis, synthesis, and assessment in terms of context, accuracy, and perspective, which must also include the application of necessary scepticism, which conditions all good disciplined thought. And it is disciplined thought which provides the bedrock of learning, clear thinking, and wise decision-making. In the instance of the AFL, the effective responsiveness and renewal necessary to navigate in this new realm with the collision of the real physical world and the digital zeitgeist derives from the strength of its culture and the resourcefulness of what I've described as AFL citizenship, which includes, at the very least, the acceptance of the inevitability and, yes, necessity of change, a respect for difference, a devotion to inclusion, an affection for talent and team equally, and finally, strong character informed from study, practice, and the value placed in caring criticism. The combination of digital and AFL citizenship is a recipe hard to beat. Stories of great careers in sport particularly are often the stuff of great drama, and Bob Rose's story is no exception. It's a story of the decency and triumph of the human spirit, reflecting special qualities of the will to win, combined with a great humility and empathy. These are qualities which, while still regularly seen in the work of myriad individuals, are challenged in many aspects of our modern life. The AFL in our country is one of the most vital influences in confronting the arch-modern disease which reflects those negative trends, apathy, and confront it we must. In Australia, we so love sport, we can't get enough of it. I wrote about it in my book, Rules of Engagement, which Sarah referred to, which Andrew graciously launched in the foreign country up there 4 years ago. In the book, I said, is that love for sport because we admire speed, strength, technical perfection, and even elegance? Yes and no was my answer. We admire all these things, but sport gives us so much more. If we cast our minds back to February 1964, when my favourite athlete, the great, as he was then known, Cassius Clay, fast, strong, technically perfect, with the elegance of a butterfly, defeated the terrifying mafia hitman, Sonny Liston, to take the heavyweight title in one of the greatest upsets in sporting history. There we saw the power of not only a great human being, but a highly independent and original citizen, a man of quite noble character. 3 years later, undefeated, having dropped his slave name to become Muhammad Ali, he was stripped of his title for refusing to take part in the Vietnam War, which had divided the American nation. Then in 1974, revelations of Nixon's bombing of Hanoi and Cambodia made opposition to the war respectable. Ali, a symbol of black liberation, entered the dark cave from which there is no escape without victory, to defeat the monster George Foreman and become arguably the most famous, respected and envied man in the world at that time and for decades afterwards. Was that just sport? Of course not. It was the classic Greek journey of the mythical hero. It was Homeric. It was beamed to the world via satellite, one of the earliest great live sporting broadcasts in history from Zaire, as it was then called, of all places. It was recorded for history in a documentary that took years to finally release in 1996. Then that film, When We Were Kings, an enduring masterpiece, rekindled the nobility of that contest and its impossible parameters afresh. To this day, I can recall the standing heart rate of Ali, arguably the fittest athlete of all time, 28 beats a minute. However, his particular story was not over. Another chapter followed in November 1994, 20 years after the Rumble in the Jungle and 2 years before Kings was released. The former monster, Foreman, now a 45-year-old, overweight, born-again preacher, slips a short right through the defences of Michael Moorer to reclaim the world heavyweight title. It's barely even sport. Moorer is a chump who only got the title by fighting a wounded Evander Holyfield. Foreman is old, fat, slow, a slugger, as technically perfect as the defunct Leyland P76, and as elegant as a KFC deluxe family bucket. And the magnificent champ Ali congratulates him. This is more than sport. It's become a story of redemption, one we all want to believe is possible. I'm sure that Bob Rose would have loved that story. After all, he was not just an AFL role model citizen, but also in his youth, a very fine boxer. That story seems to me to have as much contemporary relevance now as then. It's fair to say that heavyweight boxing has lost most of its grip on the public's imagination since both Ali and Foreman retired. For many reasons, not the least of which is the profound uneasiness with such naked aggression. But there's another very good reason for diminished popularity. The heavyweight title today often lacks the gripping stories needed by the community. Historians will all know that there's nothing new under the sun here. In talking about Ali stepping into the ring with Foreman, I could be talking about Theseus entering the labyrinth, or Russell Crowe entering the Colosseum in Ridley Scott's film Gladiator, to tell us that he's the father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, who will have his revenge in this life or the next. As I said, this is more than sport. It's a combination of storytelling with amazing real-life drama. It's also bathed in the redolent glow of ethics, knowing the difference between natural rights and that which is simply expressed as true and right. The stories of sport are rich with hope, and that infuses each story with energy and anticipation. For no matter what the odds or how bad your team's form is, all of us start the season or the beginning of a World Cup campaign or simply the next game with the burning hope that our team will triumph. It may be misplaced, it may be exaggerated, but hope always burns brightly. We need it. I mean, who could invent Alir Alir or Majak Daw, or players like Adam Goods or Robert Murphy, or Nick Riewoldt, or Nathan Buckley, or Daisy Pearce, or Erin Phillips, or Yasmina and Brendan, who we heard from earlier today, all of them exemplary citizens of the AFL, signed and delivered. And for that matter, who could dream up the drama of Kathy Freeman winning the 2000 Olympic gold in Sydney in the age of Pauline Hanson? I was there, and I'll never forget that electric moment. Sport in Australia binds the nation. It provides a community heart, and at its best is a centrepiece of inspiring, aspirational leadership. It stands uniquely in Australia for really good characteristics, like striving for the absolute best and for strong, well-directed competition underpinned by firm principles and rules. Importantly, it's one of the few examples of Australians feeling comfortable about the pursuit of excellence. At the AFL, the Commission and its executives strive to create an environment which means that on any given day or year, each team has an opportunity at being the victor. Sports often reflect us at our best, where imagination, talent, effort and discipline is nationally celebrated, as is teamwork, strategy and persistent commitment. The toughness of sports is also good for us. Time and again, the fans indicate their desire for well-managed competitions that are true to their character, hard and tough, but equally clean and fair. They instill a national will to win. They make our community stronger. As Muhammad Ali said, service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. Bob Rose, in our game, represented those values so beautifully provided from Ali as a player and coach, and later in his response to Robert Jr.'s tragic accident in setting up this foundation to support paraplegics and quadriplegics and carers financially and with counselling and psychology services and a range of peer support groups. He well understood change, respect for difference, a devotion to the fans, the need to nurture talent and team equally, and above all to offer service to others. He respected well-founded criticism and was definitionally a man of character and commitment. How I wish I'd known him personally, but of one thing I am, I am really very certain. He was the very model of an AFL citizen. Thank you.
Kim, thank you so much for what was an outstanding lecture. Please, once again, put your hands together for Kim Williams. Now, I'm delighted to welcome Andrew Demetriou to deliver a response to Kim's lecture. After a career in the AFL, which included 106 games for North Melbourne and Hawthorn, Andrew took over as CEO of the AFL in 2003, a position he held for 12 years and was an AFL Commissioner for a further 2. In his time with the AFL, Andrew is credited with spearheading a number of significant changes that would shape the game going forward, including the expansion of the league from 16 to 18 teams, the restructuring of the tribunal system and the brokering of 2 new television rights deals. He is currently the NBL Advisory Co-Chair, a Director of Bastion Collective and Crown Resorts, and the Chairman of Capital Health. Please welcome to the stage Andrew Demetriou.
Thank you, and what a pleasure it is to make my long-awaited return to public speaking, when it's not about me or what I've done or haven't done, or whether footy's future is shaky, or whether Gillen is doing a good job, or whether a red card is a good idea. Today is all about Kim Williams, although he did make a little attempt to switch the spotlight onto my time at the AFL. I've known Kim for the better part of 17 years, as he started at Foxtel in 2001 as CEO, and I was the General Manager of Football Operations at the time. I knew immediately he was smart, he was tough, he was passionate about his work. One of my earliest recollections of Kim was when we were negotiating the broadcast rights. I was CEO at this stage. Now, this was that time when all the financial ducks were in a row, and we had all the networks clamouring for the rights. I'm sure Kim will remember this well, this fateful day, when it was Foxtel's turn to present to the League's broadcast rights subcommittee. Myself, Mike Fitzpatrick, There was Gillan McLaughlin and Chris Lynch, who was the then AFL Commissioner. Now, Kim was, and is always one for fine detail. And although 7, 9 and 10 were content to roll up with a whiteboard and a few notes, Foxtel had to go the whole hog. There they were the day before in the AFL boardroom, setting up with all sorts of whiz-bang equipment, TV screens, laser lights, cameras, computers, microphones, loudspeakers. They had more technicians in that room than Putin had in Trump Tower. They could have been planting bugs around the boardroom table for all we knew. But anyway, on that big day, Kim and Peter Campbell and the Foxtel team roll in, and it's time to go. Kim was to make his presentation on screen. He has pre-recorded the opening and we were to watch him on the big screen. We were about to be gobsmacked at Foxtel's capacity to take footy into a new dimension. But when Kim's words were broadcast through this amazing system, his words were out of sync with the pictures. I thought we were back in the 60s watching Shintaro and the Samurai. There was Tombe the Mist. I thought Kim would explode. Fortunately, he didn't, and Foxtel with News Limited became part of the broadcast team. And with his guidance and clear direction in stone, Foxtel has played a significant part in the growth of the game. What's amazing, despite the naysayers who declared that live TV of all games would see attendances and membership drop off, the reverse has been the case. A clear example of the power of television and now, as Kim has said, digital communications. Kim mentioned that I spoke at his launch of his memoirs, Rules of Engagement, which was not really a memoir but a mixture of life stories, recollections, beliefs and lists. Lists of favourite books, music, TV, shows, wines, things that might surprise those who don't know Kim well but reflect his broad interests. They also explain his capacity to understand the lay of the land. He is not one of those executives who is aloof from the real world. He lives it and understands it and contributes to it. When I spoke at the launch, I put together a list of my own, a list that I believe describes the Kim that I know. And his speech today reflects that list exactly. This is what I said at that launch. Kim is a fascinating and intriguing character. He is an achiever and he is brutally honest. He has respect for people and institutions and culture, contempt for superiority, for hypocrisy and for deadheadedness, love for family, for creativity and of course music, integrity. His word is his bond, his loyalty without question, vision for what's possible and for understanding what's not, and the unexpected. All men of vision constantly surprise, and Kim is no exception. And listening to today's speech, I'd like to add another. He has a deep sense of the need for all of us to contribute to our community, our culture, and our society. And I'd like to add to that. I remember causing a bit of a kerfuffle on Australia Day way back in 2005 when I spoke at an Australia Day function. The reaction, particularly among certain members of the Howard government, was scathing. The topic of that speech was inclusion, how Australia was a better country because of immigration. And as Kim stressed, that issue has risen from the dead in recent times. I think I'm quoting Kim correctly. He said, "We see strong threats to the values of connection, belonging and community." Indeed we do. And perhaps it's time again for our leaders to look not at opinion polls, but at the broad church that is our game and how it demonstrates so powerfully all these values: connection, belonging and community. Kim also mentioned the rumble in the jungle. When he said that, I wasn't thinking so much of Ali and Foreman, but of two gladiators, of a battle to be the last man standing. No rotations. Unlike in our game, once you get into that boxing ring, there are no rotations. It's just Carey versus Djakovic, Knights versus Van der Haar, and dare I say in this room, Bartlett versus Magro. If only. And finally, perhaps this expert from Kim's book describes very well the other side of community, connection and belonging, which is, as Paul Keating described it so well, self-interest. Kim wrote about the final stages of the negotiation for TV rights back in 2005, when Foxtel first entered the fray, and the Nine network, led by the great Kerry Packer, put in a big number, one that could have KO'd the rest of the field. Kim wrote, and I hope you'll forgive the fruity language, something which I'm not really familiar with. Hi Kerry, I believe you've made an amazingly bold bid. I have done that, son, but will it win? I don't know. You moguls are pretty strange beasts. That we are. But I tell you one thing, if we don't win it, then we will fuck the others. Kerry Packer died 2 days later. Kim, I know the next few weeks will be busy for you. Finals, Brownlow medal, Rising Star, All-Australian, of course the Commission decision on the state of the game, a little bit more consultation, I understand, with Karl Stefanovic, the Honey Badger and Barnaby Joyce. I wish you luck. I'd like to thank David Polton and the Collingwood CBD group for bringing me out of oblivion to speak today. As Kim said, Bob Rose was one of the great human beings, and his devotion to his family, to his football club, and to all those who came across his wonderful life. I knew Bob and held him in the highest regard. And it's also wonderful that this event does so much for the Robert Rose Foundation. I spent some time on the foundation board in its beginnings, and Peter Rose was the editor of my late wife, Jan Bassett's books. I cherish those times we spent together. It's been a privilege to be part of today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. And just as you took your seat, I will get you to jump back up again. We have a book to present you, which is the Norm Smith Medal book by Jeff Slattery, who donated that today, published by the Slattery Media Group. Thank you very much. Please put your hands together again for Andrew Dimitriou. And of course, Kim, we would like to give you a small gift of appreciation as well. You also received the Norm Smith Medal book and Collingwood's 125th year book by Michael Roberts. So please come forward and we'll give you that. Thank you. Both extraordinary speakers, and I definitely enjoyed listening to both of them today. Now, this brings today's lecture to a close. Could you please join me in thanking Simone Yates from Minter Allison for her efforts in organising today's lunch. Well done, Simone. I would also like to recognise the event's major supporter, the Melbourne Press Club. Thank you so much for your support today. Now, as Peter mentioned earlier, the Foundation relies heavily on the generous donations of those of you in the room and outside the room today. So I would like to thank those who have already donated generously, but also remind you that you can donate via cheque, card or cash in the slip on your tables, and we appreciate any support you can give the Foundation today. We also have the Rose Brothers books, just a handful of them with us today, and Peter and Kevin will be signing them outside the room a little later on, with all proceeds going to the Foundation. They are just $25 each, so if you'd like to get your hands on one of those books, you'll have to run out there because there's only a couple to secure today. And of course, a huge good luck to our wheelchair athletes who are competing in the grand final on Sunday, the 2nd of September. Thank you so much for your time today, Brendan and Yasmina. Good luck. Sunday, the 2nd of September, 11 o'clock at Burundara Sports Complex. So I'm sure there'll be many people heading out there to see who takes the glory out of Richmond and Collingwood. Thank you all for joining us for the 16th Annual Bob Rose Lecture presented by the RACV. I'd like to invite you all to remain and enjoy the hospitality of the RACV and look forward to hosting you potentially next year for the 17th Bob Rose Lecture. Thank you so much for your time today.